Bandwidth for Changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the simplest cloud platform for developers and teams with products like Droplets, Spaces, Kubernetes, load balancers, block storage, and pre-built one-click apps. You can deploy, manage, and scale cloud applications faster and more efficiently on DigitalOcean. Whether you're running one virtual machine or 10,000, DigitalOcean makes managing your infrastructure way too easy. Get started for free with a $100 credit. Head to do.co/changelog. Again, do.co/changelog. Welcome to Go Time, a podcast featuring a diverse panel and special guests discussing cloud infrastructure, distributed systems, microservices, Kubernetes, Docker, and also Go. We record live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Join the community that's live with us in real time during the show in the Go Time FM channel in Go for Slack. Follow us on Twitter, we're at GoTimeFM. Listen live at changelog.com/live or subscribe at changelog.com/GoTime. And now on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Go Time. I'm Matt Ryer. Today we're talking about Go modules and the Athens project. Joined by the one and only Carmen Andoh. Carmen.
Hello.
How are you going?
Hello.
How have you been?
I'm doing well, and you?
Not bad, thank you. Yes. And guess what? I've got two other friends with us today.
Ooh.
Would you like to meet them?
Yes, exciting.
Imagine if you just said no.
Oh, that would just be equally as
It'd ruin it.
trolling. Yeah, I totally would. No, I'm not a troll.
Well, we're joined today by two contributors to the Athens project, I think, and we're going to learn a lot, I think, about Go modules and dependencies and things from Aaron Schlesinger and Marwan Sulaiman. Hello.
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 Did your names fall out of my mouth correctly?
99%.
If not, you're welcome to correct it.
Yeah, I'll give you 99 as well.
Oh, 99% is great. I work in machine learning. Anything above 80 is brilliant.
Motto for life.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So, Aaron, you've been on Go Time before, haven't you?
Yeah, I was on Go Time in like 2016, I think, back in the day.
And what did you talk about?
I talked about teaching Go and the Go in 5 minutes program and design patterns, I think.
Oh, wow. Great. So that episode's still available, I guess, if anyone's interested to travel back in time and go and listen to it. Or don't travel back in time, just listen to it now.
Yeah, I was looking it up the other day. I think it's maybe number 18 or something. 19 maybe.
Oh, wow. Very early then.
Yeah, I was an OG.
Great. And Marwan, you have a very interesting backstory, I think, assuming it's true. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, you're just going to have to take my word for it. So I am a Go developer from Baghdad, Iraq. I grew up in the early 1990s, which reveals my age a little bit, but it's kind of part of the story. Because even though I grew up under dictatorship, I was very lucky to have had a personal computer at home. And I feel like my mom's story is a lot more interesting than mine because my mom was actually a COBOL developer in Iraq in the 80s and 90s. Her job was a database designer, transferring a lot of the Iraqi institutions from being paper-based to digital-based.
Wow.
But because of the US sanctions at the time, her developer salary was basically a sixth of what a personal computer would cost. And so basically the monthly salary, that is. And so obviously it was, you'd have to save up for 6 months without spending a penny to be able to afford a computer at the time. But her father actually had sold the house because he was targeted by the regime for a completely different story. And he had asked each of his 6 children what they wanted as a gift from the money he had made selling the house. And my mom asked for a computer. That same computer he bought her is the one that I grew up with. And it's a super old computer that I went around the internet looking for. And I talked to my mom. I was like, do you remember what it was and what it was called? Because it was an Iraqi assembled version of what I found out to be the NEC PC 6001. In the US, apparently it was called the NEC Trek. And it's basically a big, bulky keyboard with a cartridge slot on the side. And so it came with two cartridges. One was a video game, and the other was the basic programming language. And basically, my earliest memory was that I could make it go in an infinite loop and narcissistically have it say my name in different colors. And
sounds familiar.
Ever since, I've always wanted to become a programmer. Fast forward 10 years later, the second Gulf War had torn the country apart. And in 2005, my family was targeted by terrorists. And my mom and dad wanted to send me as far away as possible without having to lose my education. And so I actually ended up coming to the US and living with a host family in Connecticut. And I went to high school while I lived with them. Then I went to college and I studied international affairs, had completely forgotten about programming, did not like my first job, and thankfully did not get the promotion that I wanted. So I quit, and I remember that I liked computers, and I joined a coding boot camp in New York City. And that's when it all started. And here I am today.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing that your mum was into computers back then. Even that's amazing for any country, that's amazing for. But yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. It's really funny. We've kind of reconnected in terms of talking about computers, because for the last, let's say, before I started programming again, for 10, 15 years, we never even talked about it, because she only did it in the 80s and 90s and had switched gears since then. And so the most interesting thing is that she still doesn't believe that COBOL is still relevant.
But it is.
It is.
Oh, but it is. That's amazing. And I think I've read so much about Iraqi culture, and a lot of women in science and math. Like one of the Fields Medal winners in mathematics she passed away a couple of years ago, but it was someone from Baghdad. And I can't remember her name, but she was at Stanford. And I just remember reading about her and then her tragic succumbing to cancer and all that stuff. So I'm sure your mom is kind of the generation just before her that led to that. And I'm so glad that she and you share that now. Now, is she still in Iraq?
Yeah, she recently accepted a job in Lebanon, so she is working in Lebanon. But my whole family's still back home.
Okay.
Well, she sounds awesome.
She is, thank you.
So please tell her that from us. Yeah.
I will.
Aaron, do you want to have a go at a backstory, or is it not going to come anywhere close to that?
No, it's the worst.
Should have gone first.
No, it's not even. It's I grew up in Chicago and then I moved here. That's it.
Oh wow!
Pretty much.
You actually took quite a lot of time saying that. I'm a bit annoyed.
I know. I should just keep my mouth shut. But I want to say, I want to take that time and instead say, Marwan, I'm super glad that you remembered that you like programming and went through the journey and went to programming boot camp and all that stuff. Ended up, among other things, working on Athens with all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad I remembered it too, because I really did not like my first job.
Also good.
And I love the story about like how it was a failure that prompted you to this path. And so maybe a reminder that sometimes failure is a really good thing in our life.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah. They do say, don't they, you don't learn from your successes, you only really learn from your failures.
Yeah.
So the smartest people you encounter are probably also the biggest failures.
Yeah.
A bit weird.
There's a book called Tribe of Mentors, and he basically just goes around and does interviews with people that have been successful in their different areas. And one of the questions is, what is your favorite failure? And I just love that because it embraces failure. And so would that be your favorite failure, Marwan?
I think so. I think sort of being unhappy is my favorite failure, because I try to get out of it as much as possible.
And that's funny because we had a sort of something a couple weeks ago where Ashley said, coding boot camps are predatory, but you were a success story of a coding boot camp in that respect.
Yes. So Ashley at some point tweeted about how to start learning, like for beginners, how to start learning programming. And I made the suggestion of I did a coding boot camp and it worked out for me. And it kind of turned into like complete opposite opinions. Some people said it was the worst. Some people said it was the best. And so, I think it's totally true. Some people have had like terrible luck. And I am one of the very lucky people that ended up enjoying it and it kind of worked out. I honestly don't have a scientific answer to why. All I did is really try my best to learn as much as possible about the boot camp, because I did hear in the beginning, a lot of companies don't trust them. They don't know how much you know. There's all sorts of preconceptions about that. And so really, I think I just lucked out.
I'm sure you put a lot of work into it too, and didn't just luck out.
Well, so the boot camp that I did was interesting. It had an interesting model, which was you don't pay for the boot camp until you get a job, which kind of gave you a bit of a safety net that like you're not just paying a bunch of money to learn nothing. So you basically, they said like, hey, if you don't end up getting a job, you don't pay us. And so part of it was that they really pushed you to make sure you learn, because otherwise they wouldn't have made money.
Mm. Which boot camp was it, Marwan?
It was called App Academy, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. I hope they're still as awesome as they were when I joined. They have they're in New York City and San Francisco.
Okay, good. Well, so I think I'm interested. We're going to get to the Athens project for sure, because I think it's quite an important part of this story. But maybe we could just chat a little bit about the history of Go and dependencies in Go, for anyone that doesn't quite hasn't used it or doesn't know, or maybe you're new to Go. It was interesting because it used to just all be about the Go path, and one of the nice things I liked about Go path was the fact that the import path was also the URL of the project itself where it was hosted. So it's just a simple thing, but it turned out in practice, whenever you would go and look in a project and see a dependency, you can just copy the import path and paste it in the browser, and then it opens that project. And I always found that as a kind of cognitive shortcut to be really useful. So I'm quite friendly when it comes to talking about GoPath. I know that it's one of the most tricky things for a lot of people and has been a challenge. And there are obviously other problems with it. But it's interesting to see then that the Go team kind of acknowledged this is a problem, and the community and the Go team all kind of started to explore different ideas around, how to do dependencies differently. So yeah, has anyone got any feelings about the anything in the history of that? Were there any projects, like what did you think of the vendor folder? Was that something that you thought was a good step, or do we feel like that was bad? How do we feel?
I'll butt in real quick. I think the vendor directory was probably the most crucial change in Go with respect to dependencies. More crucial, I think, than modules, because it started the discussion about everything we're thinking about and talking about today.
So for anyone who doesn't know, vendoring, essentially, you copy the dependency at the time that you add it. You actually copy it and stick it in a folder called vendor, and then the Go toolchain will import it from that vendored folder if it's there first, before going off and getting it from the website, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was good to start that discussion, and it was also good to kind of establish that there's going to be sort of this lookup order, if you will, when you're building your project, or how the Go tool is going to go and find the package that you depend on.
Right. There's an order, like it's going to check the vendor folder first. It'll check your other, probably the Go path next. Mm-hmm. And then if it can't find it, then it goes off and gets it from the original source.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the first times where you could set, where it was common to set an environment variable to define where your dependencies are going to come from as well. So they had I think it was the Go 1.5 vendor experiment environment variable that was released after Go 1.5. And if you set it to, I think the value was on, you set it to on, then the Go tool would first look in your local vendor directory for the dependency. And if it's there, then, and like you said, Matt, it would build from that dependency. And then otherwise it would fall back to the Go path and then up to the version control if it wasn't in the Go path. And I just remember seeing that environment variable as an option and just really liking the sort of I guess it's kind of like the 12-factor app sort of feel to it, where I can decide from project to project whether I want to use a vendor directory or I don't. I want to go just use the plain old Go path.
Which now is a flag called -mod equals vendor. So you still have that option.
Yeah, still feel comfortable in my vendor directory.
I always thought that Go path was awesome until you needed versions. And that's when things got out of the way a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because you'd start off, I mean, this happened to me where I would have a particular copy or a version of the dependency on my machine. So in my local development machine, it was using that. Now, meanwhile, that project was changing without me realizing. And then when someone else joins and wants to build the same code, of course, they don't have it on their machine, so it goes to the web to get it, and now it's changed, and their build doesn't work and mine does. That's just a very simple kind of explanation of, I think, the drawback, really, with the way that worked. Are there any other?
Well, what you just said, actually, Matt, is that was kind of the primary reason that we started building Athens. Because there's been so many breakages like that just across the community.
Yeah, I did hear one thing early when I was in Go that really kind of resonated and also did sound a bit funny, which was when someone asked that question, what do you do if the packages change? I think the answer was, well, don't change them. So once you've released a package, don't change it.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that does work.
Maintain compatibility forever.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah, well, you see, the Go core team do that. They do that for the V1 promise. And presumably, like you said, that the -mod equals vendor flag, that also shows they are supporting, they care about this stuff, that they don't want to just break everything. But does modules break things? Is it hard to turn a project into, if you have already existing code, is it difficult to turn that into a Go modules project?
It kind of is sometimes. It depends. I want to say if you are a package that has already been mature enough to have a tag that is above version 2, equal or above version 2, then, it's converting to modules is not only a pain to the author, but a pain to the people using it, using that package. And because you have to update your import path to include V2 or V3 in them. But if you're not, if you're still like version 0 point something or version 1 point something, I think converting to modules is actually quite an easy process. You can keep your go package.toml from dep. You can keep any legacy dependency management manifests. They can all work together, so you can support both modules and other things at the same time. Hopefully, there's always weird edge cases.
Yeah, and I think part of that sort of V1 compatibility promise is the Go tool is decent, I would say, at basically taking what's in what Marwan, like you said, legacy manifest file and sort of translating that into the Go modules format, which would be the go.mod file and the go.sum file. And it's probably kind of like the 80-20 type of thing. But for a lot of projects that are like Marwan said, V1, but not V2, it seems to work pretty well overall.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a bit more about the go.mod and go.sum files. What actually are they?
Sure. So the go.mod file basically defines what your own import path is, and if it is a URL looking path, then people can go get it. And so that's the very first line of a go.mod file, defining who you are, like what this program is. And it doesn't have to be, if you're working on a local project that you're never going to share with anyone but your own computer, you don't have to have full URL path as the name of your program or the import path. What comes after is basically a list of third-party dependencies and what version they are. And so that's where you kind of do most of the work. If you ever require third-party dependencies, if you do a go-get from within that project, your go.mod file is automatically updated with the latest version that Go thinks you need. And so that file is interestingly managed by the human and the computer, because a lot of go get and go build does some modification to the go mod file, but sometimes you need to get a little bit more detailed sometimes you want a fork of a dependency. And that's when the replace clause comes in. And so sometimes you could manually go in and change that file. And the go command has some help with that, where you can say like go mod replace, which at the end of the day is you're just changing the go mod file to say, hey, this import path, let's say github.com/package/errors, for example. I don't want that code. I want that import path, but I actually want to point it to another fork, something like github.com/Marwan/errors, because I have a change that maybe is not yet merged in to the upstream. And so you could dig a little bit deeper. And so that's the go mod file.
I feel like just editing the file's probably easier than using that replace tool, don't you think?
That's what I do, yeah. And so I just wanted to be a little bit technical and say you could potentially never touch it. But actually, if you go in and just put a replace clause there, copy paste an import path is quite easy. And so that's why I think the go mod file is a little interesting in that it's kind of like the human and the computer working together to make your program build, which is on itself a testament to how complex dependency management is. And so that's kind of the go mod file. And it has a companion that you touched upon called the go sum file. And that one contains integrity information about the modules you're building. And so that's when things get interesting and kind of different from other programming languages where you trust maybe a registry. The go sum file, basically for every module you download, you keep a record of a checksum of the entire code base. Go actually downloads the module and makes a zip file out of it and then calculates the checksum. And that checksum is recorded in the go sum file. And so that's when you start to say, maybe I don't need the vendor folder, right? It hints at, you can go get this dependency later on, and it has to match exactly to the byte of the original time you wanted that package. Otherwise, Go will not compile your program.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you can trust that everything is exactly as it was when you added that dependency, essentially, right?
Yes. And if it's not, you cannot compile. And so that gets into a whole other conversation of how do I ensure that, okay, well, maybe something bad happened and now I cannot build anymore. And so that's when, Athens and proxies and sort of putting a bit of, even vendor itself puts a layer of guarantees that if anything bad happens in the internet, you can still compile your program.
Bad things don't happen on the internet, do they?
Nothing. Yeah. Never.
No.
I've never seen anything bad happen on the internet.
Right?
This episode is brought to you by StrongDM. StrongDM makes it easy for DevOps to enforce the controls InfoSec teams require, manage access to any database, server, in any environment. And in this segment, we're talking to Jim Mordko, VP of Engineering at Hearst. He's sharing how they're using StrongDM within their team of 90 plus engineers. It now takes them just 60 seconds to offboard a team member from a data source.
We have an engineering team of somewhere in the area of 80 or 90 engineers. Because we've got so many services and many databases and so many developers, we need a reasonable way to manage access to them. It was a somewhat painful and labor-intensive process. Our DevOps team would literally have to manage every one of the permissions for everybody who wanted access. So StrongDM has been a real godsend in that area for us. Requests for access to specific databases were pretty much manual. Now we've adopted StrongDM. It's something that you don't even know is there. Once it's installed, it just works. It's very simple. We've set up a multitude of data sources so that when somebody's onboarded, we just give them access to StrongDM. It's pretty simple. Our DevOps team, they have a very minimal effort required to enable each data source to be connected to StrongDM, and then installing the client software is it's very, very simple and straightforward. You can use whatever client you want to talk to the database, so there's really no training necessary.
All right, if your team can benefit from nearly instant onboarding and offboarding that's fully SOC 2 compliant, head to strongdm.com to learn more and request a free demo. Again, strongdm.com.
So what happens if a dependency goes away, or a project just gets deleted? Never mind, there's a new version, but it's just gone.
Yeah, if you have a vendor folder, then you're good to go. Like, you have a copy of that dependency in your project. You might not even know that it was gone 3 years ago or whenever. But if you're using something like module system where vendor is not looked at by default, so it went from implicit to explicit, saying like, I want to build from vendor. If it's gone, you're out of luck. And so you have to have another place to keep a copy of every single module that you need. And the Go team is working on one for the open source that is currently out. And that's the public side of things. But what about private modules? And so that's when Athens comes in. But both of these really are trying to solve the solution of when modules disappear, we don't want the internet to break. And because we're relying on version control systems for dependencies, we're not relying on a registry like NPM or Ruby gems. And so there is no contract. Anyone can go delete their code base, and they should. They have their code. They can build it, they can delete it, they can change it.
I think the other cool thing on top of that, Marwan, is like we can now sort of separate the developer, the code that the developer is working on, and that whole workflow from the code that we actually get to use in our program. So I think sometimes in the CI/CD world, people separate the concept of like source code versus release asset. That's like, if you squint a little bit, that's kind of what it feels like we're doing here in the whole modules ecosystem, by saying there's the source code is the source code, and then the module is the actual artifact that me as an app developer is going to consume for your dependency. And I think that is like a big step forward for all of us.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, everything starts from the source code itself. And that really, to me, is the best part of the Go ecosystem, is that at the end of the day, the source of truth is your source code. So you don't have to say, for example, npm publish and maybe forget to push to GitHub, or maybe you do a push to GitHub and forget to publish to the registry. So everything starts from the source of truth itself is your GitHub repository. But the moment a proxy makes a copy of it, it's no longer disappearable, if that's a word.
Yeah, no, it becomes a next sort of logical unit of operation once software goes into production. Like, I really loved how you said that we have been relying on version control for dependencies and the ramifications of that have been happening in the last, I don't know how many years. But like, I look at Node.js's left pad, which was a famous vendoring incident, right? All these apps broke when a dependency was no longer available. And what would have happened if they had a proxy?
I love that story, though, the left pad thing.
Someone would have saved money somewhere.
And Carmen, that kind of points to like this concept of federation too, which is a whole other cool thing that I think the module ecosystem has that, yeah, like you said, it would have helped in the NPM ecosystem for sure, but kind of warms my heart to be able to say that the Go modules ecosystem isn't just dependent on like one server somewhere. It can anyone can run a server, and there actually already are multiple public proxies, and you can run your own proxy as well, and it all just kind of works together, and that's super, just really cool to think about, to me at least.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I loved Athens when it first came out. I mean, I remember that there was a white paper that came out, and it was the modules is based on protocols that people can use. So it was basically empowering the ecosystem to build out solutions as they saw fit. And then, of course, I saw Athens in, I think it was we were at a meetup in Portland together, and you did a presentation on it. And then I tried to steal away some of my work time to be a contributor to it, and that was short-lived. But I just love what you're doing. So both of you. And of course, there's also like Manu and a lot of other, it's such a great channel in Gopher Slack, Athens. So welcoming and just active, and people that are helpful. I really enjoy it.
Well, everyone is welcome. And Carmen, if you want to come back anytime, we're happy to have you.
Yeah.
We're annoyingly friendly.
Yes, that is a good way of putting it. Totally, Marwan.
Oh, Marwan, you should say your chill open source line.
Oh God, yeah. Who was it? I think Carolyn was saying like, I need to push this change before we release. I'll do it like Friday, and I was like, you can do it whenever you want. Like, if you want to put a deadline for yourself, totally chill. But like, otherwise, it's a chill open source project. There are absolutely no expectations. Just the fact that you're here means a lot to us.
Yes.
I love it. That should be the tagline. And of course, annoyingly friendly. Such a good tagline. What I really like about it is that you really take any and all questions. You just are a model of what I feel like open source stewardship should be.
Oh, that's nice.
So anyone out there that's running an open source project, they should have a look at Athens and see what you can learn.
Or just come hang out with us too.
So what's the history then behind Athens? How did it get started and where did it start and who was involved?
So right when the series of blog posts that Russ published, or I guess they're articles, I don't know what the technical term is, but right when those writings came out about Vigo, they had that section about the download protocol, which at the time it looks pretty much the same now. It's like 6 HTTP endpoints that are at the core of it, or maybe it's 5, something like that, a low number. And basically anyone can build that, just like you were saying, Carmen, and it's this abstraction layer, and you can kind of put whatever you want behind it. So I wrote a Buffalo app, shout out to Mark, who's not here today, but I wrote a Buffalo app that basically implemented that, and it stored the modules in memory after it went and grabbed them up from GitHub or wherever. So if you did a go get against the then Athens proxy, it would in the background go and do its own go get back up to GitHub or wherever. It would get the module down and then store it in the in-memory database. And then the next time you did a go get, it would serve that module directly out of memory. And that was a toy, pretty much. But I showed it to a couple folks. Marwan mentioned Carolyn Vents-like. And I showed it to Eric St. Martin and Brian Kettleson. And if I forgot anyone, I really apologize, but I think that's almost everybody. And they were totally into it too. So we decided to work together, and we created a new GitHub org to host this code in. And the code, I called it Vigo Prox, like Vigo Proxy, which was totally lame. And so Brian went to one of those startup name generators, and because naming is hard, I think the name that came out was like Athens-Brass. So we went with the Greek theme, just called Athens. And so that's how it ended up where it is. And then Brian did a couple talks on it. I did a couple small things like at meetups. And people just kind of like at first trickled in. And then I wouldn't say we're really having a massive surge of people, but it's more than the trickle now. It's kind of gained some steam. And obviously we have amazing contributors now, maintainers like Marwan, and we've got a bunch of others. I think there's like 6 core maintainers. There's got to be like 15 or 20 like official contributors in the GitHub org now. And there's tons of other folks who come in and they'll ask a question, or they'll fix docs, or they'll fix a bug or whatever. And I guess just a shameless plug for the community again is like, we consider like anyone who comes to say hi even or more. I just really like to think of them as like they're part of the community of Athens. And if they come in and they say hi, that's just as good as coming in and fixing a bug, because they're part of it, and they want to go and do more. We're there to help them do more. So I went a little bit off on a tangent about community again there, but I hope that paints a little bit of a history there.
No, that was brilliant. It's really interesting to see that. What I love is that it comes out of having to solve real problems. Too much of tech, and it's so tempting, we're all guilty of this, but too much of it is we just imagine cool things, and we almost imagine that there's these problems and we can build these cool solutions to it. So when there's a direct and obvious and real kind of pain point that's being addressed by something, I just love that. I mean, I think every developer needs to know what that is when they're working on something. it's easy to get abstracted down and be lost in some big organization. But if you lose the why of what you're doing, then I think you're in trouble. So I always urge everyone to do that. And this is a great example of that. There's a definite issue, there's a definite problem and some pain that we were just feeling for a long time. And then people rallied around and started to look at it. And I think that's what I love about open source. The Athens project, by the way, on GitHub now has 2,200 stars, which is pretty impressive. Not that we measure things with stars, but it does have that many stars.
And half of them are just bots I created.
Then the other half must be the bots I created. Good work, Marwan. Team effort.
The bots I created don't work, so it's none of them are that. So what about speed? Actually, let me ask you this first. What happens to test files, the _test.go files, when a module is created or a dependency clone happens?
Right. It depends on when you say when a module is created. And so if you're building your own project and you import a dependency, regardless of Athens or a proxy, when Go creates this, adds this module to your Go mod file, it does not add any test dependencies. And that's when you have to type a little magic in the command line, which is called go mod tidy. And go mod tidy is basically, it tidies up your entire go mod file. It removes any dependencies you don't need, but it also puts in all the test dependencies. And so that if you ever run your dependency tests, you'll have the right, or if you ever even basically if you're running your own tests that are relying on some files or some packages in that dependency, then you're also going to make sure that your tests are reproducible.
Right. So the tests do go along. In the proxy then in Athens, when the copy gets created, it copies the whole thing, does it?
Yeah. So the interesting part about that is the fact that all proxies must use the Go command itself to download modules. And so they don't have to, but that means they're going kind of rogue. And so there's a bit of a background to this. So for example, think that you're trying to build something from Athens. So you're on your local computer, there's an Athens server somewhere, and you say, hey, can I please get package number 1? And if Athens doesn't have package number 1 in storage, it's going to have to go get it from somewhere. And so it could go to GitHub and download it itself and just returns it to you. But the problem there is that you might have skipped a byte here and there, and your checksum is going to be completely different from another proxy's checksum or the original Go checksum. So what you have to do is that when you download the module, or when Athens downloads a module, it has to use a Go command called go mod download. And I believe go mod download, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, basically downloads the entire repo and makes a zip file of it. And so that it ensures, it has a couple of rules. I believe it skips symlinks and maybe a couple things, but it keeps pretty much most files in there, and it creates a zip file. And so it's a nice abstraction that Athens doesn't even have to think about. As long as it has the Go command, it calls go mod download, and it basically downloads everything for you. And we just have to store whatever go mod download put on disk.
So if there was an image in that repo, and someone changed just that image, would that then just be a different checksum? So therefore it's considered different, even though it is the same?
It should be.
I think the checksum is only over code. Is that right, Marwan? Do you know?
That's a really good question. I remember playing with it. I've never looked at I've glanced over the Go modules code, and there's quite a lot there. But I remember it skipped a few things. I don't remember it skipping random files and just looking at code, but I could be wrong.
Interesting.
I will try to sneak in a quick experiment as we talk.
Someone in the channel, if you know, paste it in there.
So when they put the build caching in, I noticed builds were just a lot faster. What happens to speed with using Athens and using Go modules? Do we get performance improvements there too?
Basically, the interesting part about using an HTTP protocol to download modules, so whether it's Athens or something else, is that you're not using a Git or a version control system based way to download a module. So imagine if you're depending on, say, CockroachDB, and you want to download it. The old way would have done a Git clone, which means it downloaded the entire history But with the new proxy, you know exactly what version you want. And so you just want a zip formatted state of that repository. You don't need to download the entire version control system history behind it. And so that's a huge performance gain. And once you have it in storage, that's even a higher performance because you don't need to go get it from the internet. And so the performance, I believe the original Vigo papers had CockroachDB as an example, saying like it's 4 minutes versus a few seconds, which is a big difference.
Wow. That is really cool. And actually especially important if you're in a country or a town where the internet connection really isn't doing it for you. And I know that there are gophers that are in the situation with kind of small, low quality internet connections. That's going to actually make a real difference there to builds and adding dependencies, I guess. That's awesome.
I think another part is that since it's HTTP, it's the web. So you can cache it, you can put CDNs in front of it, you can do all the cool HTTP things that web developers know and love. Like I don't know all the details of some of the public proxies that are out there right now, but if I had to guess, I would say that they're probably sitting with CDNs next to them. And that means that if you do a go get using one of those proxies, you would be go getting one of those tiny zip files from somewhere really close to you that has really good bandwidth.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I feel like
awesome.
this, like Matt, you said earlier, how we're empowered to sort of find a thing and remember the why and fix the why. And I think you just defined what makes for a healthy ecosystem. And I think Athens is an exemplary project for how dependency management is an interesting problem in distributed systems and developing software today, and how the community and the ecosystem steps up to help fix that.
Yeah, I love that.
There are a lot of my favorite part is everything you said, and the fact that you can also extend what the base protocol is. And so to me, that's when I found like Athens to be the most interesting project, because you touched upon speed and you touched upon this need to have this. And then from there, you can say, wait, now I have a storage of all my modules. And so you can think about maybe a company wants to run an Athens server for all of its projects. And now its storage has every single dependency they know this company depends on. And so to me, that's my favorite part about a proxy versus vendor. And so if each project vendored its own dependencies, you're really kind of not aware of what each project needs. You have to go in and look at the vendor or go in each project and see what they depend on. But now you have a central place for this company's modules from all the projects. And you can do things maybe like scan over them and look for vulnerable projects. You can like integrate with like third-party security software, if you will. You can do all sorts of things. You can basically build anything you want out of that central place.
Not to mention the security implications, right? So when you index it with a SHA or some sort of hash, and you make sure that any sort of, attack possible vectors can be headed off at the pass because you have indexed it and you know that the package that you're getting is the package that you want. I'm not sure if that is ever going to be a possible exploit or if it has been and I'm unaware, but I know that sometimes I've asked in the past, like, how do I know that the thing that I'm getting, if I'm not using SSH, isn't being fuddled with in the middle? And version control certainly helps with that because they do have commit SHAs and everything like that, but they don't do it with objects and releases and tags outside of GitHub. So if you're not dealing with GitHub or GitLab, like, I just wonder about that often.
Yeah, and the security and integrity kind of story, if you will, on the whole modules ecosystem, it's got a lot of cool layers to it. I call like these sort of internal organizational things the quote enterprisey features. And it's a very technical term, but it's like Marwan, it's like what you and Carmen, what you said too, is you have this ability to control one sort of entry point instead of relying on GitHub or the VCS to do your authentication of modules for you. But then on top of that, the Go team has added another layer of auditability, basically, by letting you verify that before you even go get a module, it already knows and can prove to you that there's sort of an audit trail of what the checksum for that module is as well. So before the code even enters your code base, you can actually prove that that code hasn't been fuddled with. And then after it's in your code base from then on, you have those checksums that you can always look at, and it'll automatically fail your build and all that great stuff as well. So it's kind of another testament to the community as well that, you know, we've got these open protocols, and now we can build all these different layers in the security space in this case. That I think is just really cool.
Mm-hmm.
This episode is brought to you by GoCD. With native integrations for Kubernetes and a Helm chart to quickly get started, GoCD is an easy choice for cloud-native teams. With GoCD running on Kubernetes, you define your build workflow and let GoCD provision and scale build infrastructure on the fly for you. GoCD installs as a Kubernetes native application, which allows for ease of operations, easily upgrade and maintain GoCD using Helm, scale your build infrastructure elastically with a new Elastic agent that uses Kubernetes conventions to dynamically scale GoCD agents. GoCD also has first-class integration with Docker registries, easily compose, track, and visualize deployments on Kubernetes. Learn more and get started at gocd.org/Kubernetes. Again, gocd.org/Kubernetes.
How do we use Athens today then? Do you use that Go proxy environment variable, or is that, do you not have it hosted yet? Is it publicly available? What's the situation?
So Athens is made primarily to host internally or for your own mirror, basically. So tons of people are running it in their CI pipelines. There are some folks I know who run it inside of really regulated firms that just shut down access to the internet. I know of one person, this was as of a couple months ago, they're running it in an organization that you literally have to take code from a USB stick and get it approved by legal, and then you can load it into Athens. So that's sort of the main use case of it. But myself, and I think there's some other folks out there, we just like to have fun with it. So like I host it in the cloud, and then I do like weird stuff, and I build all these like dumb extensions to it and things like that. So one of the ones that I host is on our docs page. That's kind of like, this is the one you can try. You don't have to set up any Athens by yourself. You can just set go proxy equals this address and start doing stuff with Athens. But then there are a lot of instructions on how to install it. Everything from just running a Go binary all the way up to running it in Kubernetes and stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, the website's great. I recommend anyone interested. Is it docs.gomods.io?
Yep, that is it.
I recommend checking that out for anyone that's interested.
Yeah, if anyone wants to download and use Athens, I honestly think, go to docs.gomods.io, but also go to the Athens Slack channel, and you'll probably get a very quick answer there too.
It's very active in Gopher Slack, the Athens channel, for sure. Super helpful.
Brilliant. Were there any surprises as you were building Athens? Because I think a lot of the value in it really comes, and this could be wrong, but it seems to me like a lot of the real value of it just kind of comes from the design of it and the thinking of it. But was it technically difficult to implement, or were there any surprises as you were building it and as you've been working on it?
Were there surprises? I mean, yes. I'm trying to think of like a real example, because all I remember right now is like saying, I didn't think of that, but I don't remember what.
I have a couple.
It was that I didn't think of.
Did you not use Did you not use a dependency manager for it?
I won't say.
As of today, it still uses vendor, and we're pretty close to having it not use vendor, which is kind of a really funny thing. It's like, do we even trust this new module system? Even though we're building on top of it. But really, I mean,
can you edit that part out?
No, it really. I mean,
it only works when I say something
that's
bad.
really the funny part.
Okay. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because everything is still, honestly, I love the fact that we're still using vendor, and we're just now thinking of removing it because the vendor is something that's been proven and used for a long time now, and the module system is still very, very new, and it's only going to be on by default in the next version. And so I feel like it's a very kind of like adulting decision to make, to say we're excited about this, but we're also very careful, and we may want to make sure that it works. And only when we think what we're building is good enough that we'll build it with Athens, building Athens with Athens. And so I think we're there.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough, because remember, Go used to be written in C.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's the same thing.
I think there's another part of that too, is when Go first came open source, there was kind of a call to build the Go spec in lots of different implementations. And that's kind of what we're hoping for, and we're kind of getting as a community now. There's the proxy.golang.org, there's Athens, there's a gocenter.io. I know there's another one called Go Proxy out there on GitHub. Someone showed me one that was built in Bash.
Ooh.
That blew my mind.
What?
If you are the one who built it in Bash, can you put the link to it in the GoTime FM channel? Because that thing was cool.
But it's an HTTP server, isn't it?
Yeah, you can do that in Bash, apparently.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That's why outraged.
All sorts of awesome implementations. And my favorite part is now in 1.13, the Go proxy environment variable is going to be a comma-separated argument or value. And so that you can actually tell Go to build things from multiple proxies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes all sorts of cool stuff where you can maybe have your internal proxy first that only stores your internal code. And then for any public code, you just return to the Go command a 404, and it will move on to the next proxy. And maybe the next proxy is proxy.golang.org, but if it's down, maybe it'll hopefully return a 404 and maybe move on to the next one or whatever. Like, you can ensure high availability as long as that proxy guarantees it, and you can kind of put all sorts of different logic from the client side.
Do you know if it also, or if they could support the e-tags and the if match header and things, so that you could even say, give me this dependency if it's changed, if not? Or does that not make sense because you're already asking for specific versions anyway?
You're not necessarily asking for a specific version, because when you want to download a module first, so the Go download protocol comes with 5 different endpoints. And so one of these endpoints is a bit of a discovery endpoint, saying for this module, what versions do you have? And so this is the @v/list endpoint. And so when you say, go package errors /@v/list, you might get a list of semantic versions. And if the repository doesn't have semantic versions, it'll go to the next discovery endpoint, which is called @latest. Say, okay, if you don't have any semantic versions, just give me the latest, which could be like a kind of like a git commit type pseudo semver. And so that said, currently there is no way to support. Actually, I'm not familiar with e-tags, but any sort of special headers, I know as of now it doesn't support, which I can get more into. But maybe explain e-tags first.
No, it's usually you just send a string, I think, and then the server decides whether it has a newer version based on that, and then it sets an e-tag header. So it's just a caching thing, but I wondered if that played into this, or if it could. But it's quite interesting. And I was thinking as well about if somebody owns a GitHub repo, or they sort of maintain a project, is there anything they should be aware of now that perhaps wasn't as important? And I'm thinking specifically maybe like tagging releases and things like that. But are there other good practices and things?
Semver. So you said it, tagging releases, but modules really take Semver pretty seriously. Marwan touched on it at the beginning of the episode. When modules sees that you've bumped a Semver, major Semver, it requires a new path. So by module path, I mean, if you're going from V1 to V2, which would be a breaking change, your module path would be /V2. If you're going to do GitHub tags or Git tags, you got to really pay attention to whether you're making a breaking change or not. And if so, know that that's going to mean folks who want to pick up your breaking change are going to update their import paths to add that /V2 to the path itself.
Just adding on to that the Go team, I believe, is building a tool that will help you catch whether you're making a breaking change at least in your API signatures, like function and type signatures, and it will kind of warn you so that you shouldn't like tag a new release as a minor version or a patch version, that it should be a major version. I don't remember where that code lives, but I believe it's in either experimental or X tools.
That's a shame because I just had that exact idea. Not a shame.
So I think there's a talk about it at GopherCon, if I remember.
Yeah, of course, that a lot of that tooling now becomes possible. And like dependency graphs and things, writing tools like that probably becomes a lot easier as well.
I like the point you made, how Semver is now, to people who kind of just sort of half-ass Semver with modules going into effect as default for 1.13, people are going to have to be very, very thoughtful about Semver versioning. And I know at least I have definitely YOLO'd my Semver versioning, at least on the minor releases. So, but yeah, like I think that's another good artifact of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no exception. I basically, the only time I ever release a V2 is just create a new repository because I don't even know what to do. I'm just like, yeah, I'll just do patch if I feel like it's kind of small, or minor if I feel like it's kind of big, and try not to break anything. That's kind of what I do now. And probably when we do a V1.0.0 of Athens, I hope that there are other contributors that are way better at Semver than I am, basically.
My favorite use case is the twerp framework is trying to upgrade or migrate to modules, and they're already at version 5. And so there's a whole discussion about how to go to version 6 and introduce modules, but still support people not using modules. And so it's definitely it's definitely a complex topic when you want to ensure backward compatibility.
Yeah, in fact, it's funny because Mark Bates once sent me a message and he just said, "We can't be friends anymore because you haven't tagged your releases in this repo." That was it. And I've not heard from him since.
And that's why he's not on this show today.
You drove him away.
Yeah. Yes.
So the moral of the story is tag your releases.
Yes, with semantic versioning.
With Semver.
Just makes things so much easier to see like a V1.1.1 or whatever, to see that in your go.mod file instead of like a huge long like commit hash. Community wise, it's kind of just like makes more sense to share your code that way because it has so much more information in it for a human to read than having a hash that you would have to go into GitHub and find and do all that good stuff. Yeah,
and it's also good practice for other reasons as well. If we think about the Go's 1.0 promise of protecting everything's going to be backwards compatible to this point, when you do tag that V1.0.0 release the first time, it's a significant event, and it feels more like that. Whereas if you're just not paying any attention to it, maybe you feel like you're at version 1 already, but actually doing it, I think it's quite a nice event that you get to look forward to in a project. And I especially like, the Buffalo project's been running for years and they're not at version 1 yet. And it's for the same reason. They want to, once they go to version 1, they're going to make sure the stuff always works. It's one of the things I think that really helped Go get its adoption and be one of my favorite kind of tools and languages to use because I can rely on it.
Yeah, that's a good point about the pre 1.0 releases too, because modules assumes that anything pre 1.0 could break at any time. So if you're a VO.whatever, that's a signal to people in the modules ecosystem that, this could be a breaking change if it goes from anything to anything when you're at the VO.whatever tree of releases. And it's kind of the inverse of the 1.0 promise, kind of. Because when you're at 1.0, then you know that you're stable.
Yeah. So when you say that Go modules knows that things could break at any moment, what does it do with that information?
Well, it goes back to the path that I was talking about. When you go from 1.0 to 2.0, in that event, or 2 to 3 or whatever, that's when you have to update your path to /v2 or /v3.
Right.
But when you go from v0.x to v1, you don't have to change the path, because they assume that when you're at the v1 release, you're going to be at github.com/mypackage. And from that point onward, from the v1 onward until you get to v2, you should be able to update your minor and your patch release as someone who's depending on the package, the module that we're talking about. And you shouldn't have any breakages, obviously. But they don't treat the event going from v0 to v0 whatever to v1 as a major event like that, because you are already supposed to assume that everything was going to break when you went from v0 whatever to v1.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's brilliant. Actually, it follows how we really are building things, doesn't it? It follows the reality of the fact that, before version 1, it is going to be fluid. And I like that. I like the fact that it has that kind of sympathy to how the community already does things.
Yeah, sympathy to the developer too.
Yeah, I would say Semver is not purely, it's mostly a human contract. You can do as much work as possible to have computers figure out, API signature changes, like I mentioned before. But at the end of the day, computers can't really do a good job figuring out behavioral changes. And so behavioral changes are also part of the contract of API stability, and so, or compatibility, if you will. And so really, like when you say, I changed my Semver version, this is a new release, it's a human decision. Because even if you kept your entire API the same, but you changed the behavior, you're supposed to change the major version.
Right, yeah.
Marwan with the good sound bites today. Semver is mostly a human contract, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have written them down, like I have a few more.
just do them and we'll pick the best one.
Just good sound. I have a document called Good Sound Bites.
Ooh. I need in my life. Give it to me.
Sound bites spelled BYTES, says Ian Moley on Slack.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's fair
That's
enough.
how I spell it. Isn't there any other way? There's no other way to spell bytes at Go time. BYTES.
Let me ask you this quickly. Do you know what 4 bits is called? 8 bits is a byte, right?
Half of a byte.
God, what is that?
Huh.
No.
It's a thing? It's a unit?
Well, I think so, because I have something in my head that I remember, but I just can't remember where it's from, and I've never checked it. I've never revisited it until just then.
I have to say, I am kind of sweating it a little bit because it feels like a job interview question.
Oh, well, we'll let you know.
Someone put an amazing one into the channel.
It's
I don't want to give it away.
It's a nibble. That's what I thought it was too.
Oh, that's
awesome.
I don't know if Ian's joking.
NYBBLE? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Someone verify this. Someone get me a link.
It's verified.
Snope this. We need to snope the nibble. NYBBLE.
Yeah.
Oh, it's verified. But this is Wikipedia. I don't know.
But it's so nerdy though, it has to be true.
I know. It really is. I want it to be true so bad.
Me too. Me too.
We can just make anything be true. We just have to all say it. It's easy.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Ian on Slack saying he spelled it wrong, but actually, if you read it, it does say that one of the alternative spellings is NYBBLE. So yeah, nibble.
So cool.
Good.
So cool.
Am I the only one who feels like nibble with a Y is more nerdy than with an I? Okay.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
Okay. Cool.
You might as well. I think if you're calling 4 bits a nibble, you know what I mean. You're already not going to be popular at most parties. You might as well pop a Y in.
Yeah. Go big or go home.
Yeah.
My new DJ
exactly. Or go home. Just go home, please. That's what they say at the party. Not you. I'm not saying that now. That's what they say to
me.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, well, I just want to, thank you so much. This has been an excellent episode, I think. Dependencies are a pain in any language. And, Go had GoPath before, and we got by with it, but it definitely wasn't right, didn't feel right. And so Go module seems like it's a step in the right direction, and seems like it's going to really help us here. And then, of course, the dependency proxies and things are also here to help. And if you need that in your own environment, then check out the Athens project. I think you're going to love it. That's all from Go Time this week. We'll see you next week.
All right, Go Time is back. It's been so much work behind the scenes, but it's definitely paying off now. And it's so much fun producing this show. We have so many people listening live. Thank you so much for that. We love you. And if you're not yet, hang with us in Go for Slack. We have a channel called Go Time FM. Look it up. You'll find us. Chat with the community, share stories, share coffee recipes, whatever. It's a lot of fun. Also, we have discussions on every single episode at changelog.com. So head to changelog.com/GoTime, find this episode, and discuss it with the community. And of course, thank you to our sponsors, DigitalOcean, StrongDM, and also GoCD. Huge thanks to Fastly for being our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast and fix things around here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com/changelog. And we're hosted on Linode cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Our music is by the one and only Breakmaster Cylinder. And if you want to hear more episodes like this, subscribe to our master feed at changelog.com/master, or go to your podcast app and search for Changelog Master. You'll find it. Subscribe, get all of our shows in one single feed, as well as some extras that only hit the master feed. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. Congratulations. You've listened all the way to the end of the show. And guess what? Got a little surprise for you. Here's a preview of Brain Science, our upcoming podcast coming out very soon. The easiest way to subscribe is to subscribe to our master feed. Head to changelog.com/master. Get all of our podcasts in one single feed, plus some extras that only hit the master feed, including Brain Science. Brain Science is a podcast for the curious. We're exploring the inner workings of the human brain so we can understand things like behavior change, habit formation, mental health, and this thing we call the human condition. It's hosted by myself, Adam Stacoviak, and Muriel Reese, a doctor in clinical psychology. It's brain science applied, not just how does the brain work, but how do we apply what we know about the brain to better our lives? Here we go. As humans, one of the things that separate us from any other animal out there is the fact that we have language, we have words, and we have super powerful words that truly change how we feel and how we make other people feel. If the words we say have so much potential to influence ourselves and the world around us, how do we begin to understand the power of words?
So words really are the thing that separates us from all other animals. Because, right, sharks, bats, dogs, lizards, they don't talk. And this is really critical when it comes to managing our moods and our feelings. One of the things that I sort of talk about, or even I mentioned earlier about the way in which we file things in our mind according to feelings, this is exactly how we differentiate it too. Thinking about an example like with professional athletes, you might say that they get anxious, like before a race or before, a run or a dive. But using that word, it's not really a threat, right? But their brain would be like, oh, I'm nervous, and now I start this whole sequence of events in my body. Whereas if I just change the word to like, I'm anticipating or I'm excited, it creates a different sort of rollout of emotions as well as physiological responses. I mean, I'm anxious about going to Disneyland is not usually what we say, right?
I'm excited.
Exactly. So it then puts a lid on or files things differently in our mind, which then changes how we feel about it. So in my field, in psychology, we always say name it to tame it. The better I can name different feelings, the more I can tame whatever emotion that is. And so then I'm not really stuck living in this sort of mammal and reptile lane where I'm always just flipping my lid, I'm reactive, I'm angry, or I'm sad. But rather I can go, I recognize this is how I'm feeling, or like I'm afraid of some other threat, like losing my job. And I can go, you know what? Here's the words I can use to talk to myself about that fear so that I'm not just stuck feeling afraid of a possible threat, which has never occurred yet.
You use this concept too to say customized thinking. I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean by customized thinking. What do you mean by that?
Well, because we are human, we do have the power of choice, which is super powerful. Like nobody has to tell you how you need to think or how you need to feel, right? And like your version of success might be very different than mine, which is going to impact my choices and the direction I'm headed. And so when you think about customized, right? I mean, you can customize a car, you can customize your order at a restaurant. Like it really is tailored specifically to you and going, how do I want to think and how do I want to feel? One example I consider is I want every day of the week to feel like I do on the weekend. Because to me, the weekend feels great. I'm with my family. I'm not sort of running things with such a tight timeline. And there's just a different sort of ethereal vibe to the weekend.
Right.
And I think, why does that only have to exist on the weekend?
Yeah.
I want that every day.
Why is that? I want that every day too.
Well, and I think part of it is really our attitude and our expectations. I mean, there are legitimate threats all around us, but it doesn't help me do my life any better if I am only focused on threats. So I want to practice changing the channel in my mind that says, hey, yeah, I see that potential job loss, but I also see I'm with my family right now. And right now, nobody can take sort of what I've been through and how I feel away from me. I'm in charge of how I feel. So I'm going to do things that actually contribute to feeling better.
So how do we apply this name entertainment idea to this model then? Because maybe if you name the week the weekend, can you change how you feel about it? Because that's really what it's about. It's like, how do we take, the labels we apply to things, the names we give things, the words we use, the choices, what I think we might call nuance. I'm not really sure how you put that into play with the power of words, but the difference between, like you said before, being anxious or being excited, fundamentally it's almost the same feeling, but from a nuance level, it's very different. It's one direction or the other of excitement, negative excitement potentially or positive excitement. How do we apply that to customized thinking?
Well, I think that's a great way to say it, Adam. I really like that nuance, because what we're looking for, even as I talk about the different brains, we want a symphony. I mean, I'm not going to fire the woodwind section because I don't like a violin, right? So I don't want to fire a certain part of my brain like, you're not really helpful, I don't need to see that. But what we need is a sense of congruence. And so, sure, not every day of the week can feel exactly like the weekend. So I'm not going to say this is how I feel, but I have to actually believe it for it to impact my mind, my brain, and my body in the way in which I desire it to. And so I might use the words like, I strive for every day to have a feeling that reminds me of exactly how I feel on the weekend, so that I don't lose sight that like every day really is a gift and I get to enjoy every day of my life to some degree. And so another example might be, I'm living out in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of people have negative feelings about the weather. Imagine that. But so if someone were to say that they just need to learn to love it, that's going to create what we call cognitive dissonance. It doesn't fit. So it doesn't matter how much I'm like, oh, I do love the gray. I do love the clouds. It's not going to jive with me. And so it won't stick. So instead, I can say, I love the way in which the rain creates the green. And in the summer, when it is green, it is amazing.
This idea of learning to live with it, though, get over it. It is what it is. Like, there's so many phrases we use to say just that, like, just learn to live with it. What is it called again?
Cognitive dissonance.
And what does that mean when you play it out?
It doesn't go together.
Okay.
So that if you're like, oh, just do it, you just need to get over it. Like, that really isn't helpful either, because your body's giving you a signal and your brain is telling you, I don't like this sensation. I don't like how this feels. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, I just hate the gray, and the gray is just overwhelming. And so we have to go, well, what's my emotional buy-in? Like, what do I like? How does that even allow me to enjoy something else? And so I'm going to look at going, you know what? I really like that I get to wear warm clothes, or I really do love my coffee because it's for such a long time, it's gray and rainy. I want to be inside by a fire drinking my coffee.
Right.
And so how can I look for going, you know what? If I do these things I might not want to do, I do get some more of what I do want to do. And so it's really almost like a bartering system in your brain of saying, if you do this thing you don't like, you get this thing you do like. Or, you know, I know you don't have to make yourself do this thing unless you can see a way in which it actually benefits you or speaks to you emotionally. Everything, Adam, really has to have this emotional buy-in. And if there's no good emotion, really, the primary neurochemical in our brain is dopamine for feeling good. I don't get some hit of dopamine, my brain's going to be like, it's not worth it. And I'm not going to do it. Period.
That's a preview of Brain Science. If you love where we're going with this, send us an email to get on the list to be notified the very moment this show gets released. Email us at editors@changelaw.com. In the subject line, put in all caps, Brain Science with a couple bangs if you're really excited. You can also subscribe to our master feed to get all of our shows in one single feed. Head to changelog.com/master or search in your podcast app for Changelog Master. You'll find it. Subscribe, get all of our shows, and even those that only hit the master feed. Again, changelog.com/master.